Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back, because today I'm going to give you guys a review for the first season to one of my most anticipated shows of the year, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. It takes us right back to the Middle-earth franchise for the first time since the end of the Hobbit trilogy back in 2014. I was really looking forward to this show. It stars Morfydd Clark, Robert Aramayo, Benjamin Walker, alongside a big ensemble cast, with the showrunners being J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. And with that said, let's get started. The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, is set thousands of years before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and it is set in the Second Age of Middle-earth, as we follow all these characters from Galadriel to Elrond, and all of them as we see them traverse and explore this Age of Middle-earth, while also dealing with the potential fall of Númenor, the rise of Sauron, the rise of the orcs, and so as the battle for the Southlands and the fight between good and evil in Middle-earth. I was really curious to see what Amazon has in store for the show. I've never expected a show about Middle-earth in quite some time. I thought that after the Hobbit trilogy came to a close, I thought that was it, because we have the Hobbit and we have the Lord of the Rings officially told in film. And I'm a big fan of Middle-earth. We got the movies right here. You see, we got the extended editions of Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, alongside Return of the King, which is one of my favorite movie conclusions of all time. And I first was introduced to the Middle-earth franchise, actually not through the Lord of the Rings movies, but through the Hobbit movies. Obviously, they're not quite as good as the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I still enjoyed them for what they were, and I was loving J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy world with all these characters, the hobbits and the elves and the dwarves. I really love this world, and I was so excited to be thrust back into this world in a new time period with the Rings of Power. So it has been a while since the show was announced, and I was really curious to see what they have in store with it. So now that I had the chance to finally see the first season of the show on Amazon Prime, I really enjoyed Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Right off the bat, it's a very nice return to the world of Middle-earth with some great characters, and it is easily one of the best looking projects I've ever seen in the film and television medium. Kicking things off, I really like the cast of the show. I really like Robert Aramayo as young Elrond. I think he is great. I love how he plays off of Durin, because both of them, they have like one of my favorite storylines on this whole show. I love their dynamic, and Robert Aramayo does a good job of working alongside all these other characters. He's very fun, charming to watch, and he had this great presence on screen where I was so happy to just see Elrond be Elrond on the show. And we also have Morfydd Clark as young Galadriel, and she is awesome. I love how she's shown to be a capable warrior, but we also see her struggle and her pain and the trauma that she is enduring through as she is trying to get revenge and kill Sauron for what happened to her brother. I really like Galadriel. She is such an awesome character on the show. And so is Ismael Cruz Córdova as Arondir. He is one of my favorite characters on the whole show. Just to see what he goes through and how he goes as far as he can to help the people of the Southlands. He is just so cool. There are a lot of sequences here where I was just cheering for him. He was awesome. And I think everybody as a whole is great, because this is a very big ensemble show, and everybody here does a really good job. And I really like the characters from Elendil to Isildur to Queen Regent and Durin. Everybody was really good on this show. The second thing I really like here is the absolutely top-notch production value and visual effects. This is the most expensive TV show of all time, from what I've checked. It is so expensive that it shows on screen. It is beautifully shot. It is just fantastic in terms of visuals. Right from the opening 30 minutes of the first episode, I knew that I was in for a special treat when it comes to the visuals of the show. They are phenomenal, and I love how much production the crew and Amazon put into it. It really is meticulously crafted, from the way the sets are designed, how buildings look, the costumes and the weapons. It's fantastic. I am in awe of how fabulous this show looks. It's just amazing how much hard work they put into it, and it really pays off, because this looked incredible. It's one of the best pieces of TV and movie from a visual standpoint and production standpoint that I have ever seen. Howard Shore, the iconic composer for The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy, did return for the title intro of the show, and it's great, but the score by Bear McCreary is amazing. It very much captures that Middle-earth feel that I love to feel, and it's so great, especially with how he uses instruments and the sounds and how it really gives all these different locations in Middle-earth a different feel, from when you get to the people in Númenor, to where you get to the Harfoots, to where you get to the orcs. It's haunting. There's great differentiations between all of these locations, and he does a great job with the score and the tracks that he composes for this show. It's just so great what Bear McCreary was able to do, especially taking the reins from somebody like Howard Shore, who's like the John Williams to the Middle-earth franchise. And I think Bear McCreary did fantastic with this score. I love listening to it. I love the tracks, and I love how they were utilized. And they made every character and location have a unique feel to it that I just really enjoy for something like Middle-earth. The spectacle and the action sequences are spectacular on this show. It is not a very action-heavy show, but when we do get the action sequences, they are awesome. From the visual standpoint, they're fantastic, and even from the choreography and the way they're filmed, it's excellent, because you really feel how massive and epic the scale of these sequences are, where every character gets something to do, and it feels very satisfying when you see these on screen, especially with the resolutions to them. And there are some massive spectacle sequences where my jaw was on the floor by how awesome they were on screen. The cast was utilized really well in them. The characters all have meaningful roles within these action sequences, and it really makes things so grand that it feels like you're once again watching something that you would find from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies. And I really appreciate that, because even though you're tackling something from the second age of Middle-earth and not the third age, like where Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are, you still have the things that make a Middle-earth project a Middle-earth project. One thing I was really hoping the show would do is make it actually feel like this would be from Middle-earth, because we've had projects like The Witcher, Game of Thrones, where a lot of those fantasy worlds, you have a lot of horrible and gritty things going on in this world where nothing is safe, bad things happen everywhere. Thankfully, it very much captures that Middle-earth feel. Obviously, we're in the second age of Middle-earth, not the third age like The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are set in, but you still very much have that Middle-earth feel, where you got the Harfoots, they're off doing their thing, they're just living, trying to survive. Then you have the elves and what they do, and you got the dwarves doing their thing, and so is the orcs. So you get the danger, you get all the stuff that makes a Middle-earth project, while also staying true to the franchise, while having some stuff that's set way back in the past, which is a new time frame that we're exploring for Middle-earth in this medium. So I really appreciated that they kept the Middle-earth feel on the show and not try to make it like almost every other fantasy world out there right now, because Middle-earth is a very distinct and unique franchise in the fantasy genre, and the show really nails that Middle-earth spirit. The final 3 episodes are wild. That's where a lot of the payoff really commences, because that's where you get the action. That's where you get characters meeting up. That's where you get set up for season 2. This stuff had me at the edge of my seat, because the first 5 episodes are very much like build-up episodes, where it's trying to develop these characters, all these different storylines, because there's a lot of storylines going on. You have Elrond and Durin, you have the Harfoots, you got Galadriel and Halbrand and Númenor, you got the orcs, you got Arondir and the people of the Southlands. There's a lot of storylines on this show, and so I like that they're able to make these episodes an hour long or longer, so that they can utilize all of these storylines and characters, but also the fact that a lot of these episodes in the first half of the show are very much build-up episodes, where they're trying to develop the characters and the storylines in this new time frame of Middle-earth, because this is set thousands of years prior to what we've seen in Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And so I like that. I like how they do it. And so as make all these things happen later, so that it elevates aspects from the movies and even the story when you reread or watch them again. And so with that said, I do think that the first half of the show can be a little slow. If you're someone who loves action and you love like a good action sequence in those first 2 episodes, you're not going to be too entirely satisfied just yet, because it's very much a build-up episode, where the first half of the show really takes time to just develop the world and the characters and these locations and just the situation here. It doesn't drop you right into the action right from the get-go, and whether how you feel about these kind of shows is all up to how you feel about them. But for me, it worked fine for me because I love Middle-earth. I really like the characters and I like what I'm seeing visually, and I was very interested in the story that I was able to stay invested and entertained, even if things are just in the developing phase. But episode 6 is where the action and the craziness really increases, and that's where a lot of the exciting stuff really comes in if you love the spectacle side of things. And that happens in episode 6, and it's fantastic. That is probably my favorite episode of the whole season, because I loved episode 6 of this show. And then you get to episode 8 with the finale, where things are being pushed into new directions, where I'm very intrigued as to what this means for our characters moving forward into season 2. And it ends on a note where I was surprised they do this, and that this is what ends up playing out, that I am super excited to see where things go, because there are mysteries that have been laid out from the season. Some of them get answered, some of them just get pushed into exciting directions where we want to know these answers. And this show has that. It has intrigue that I really appreciate, and it leaves me on a note where I'm super pumped to see what's next for our characters in the second season. While I really like the show a lot, and I like the production, the cast, and the action, and the story, I do think it's pretty slow. Some episodes feel like not much has really occurred in these episodes, because again, it's largely developing phases, and I do feel like some storylines are kind of repeating certain beats every episode, and I'm left there wondering, when are things going to push forward, or when are certain characters going to meet up, when are certain questions going to be answered. There's a lot of things here where it does take a lot of time, that sometimes the tension may not always be present at certain moments. You don't feel like these characters are in danger like others may be. So I do hope that going into the next season that we get more tension. It's a lot more fast-paced, because I don't mind slow burn stuff, but this show can be very slow to some people. But I didn't mind it as much, but I do hope that in season 2, it's a lot more fast-paced. There's a lot more tension here, because some storylines could have done more than others. Because while I really enjoyed the storylines a lot, especially Elrond and Durin's and Galadriel's and Elrondir's, it does feel like sometimes we're taking way too long to get from point A to point B, and I do hope that in season 2, things get there a lot quicker in a much more natural rate, so that there's more excitement to be had. But I do hope, but it looks like with season 2, because of how the season ended, that we're going to get a much more spectacle and action-driven season with season 2. So I hope that it takes what works from season 1, but tries to do some things to improve on what the season had. Overall, I loved the first season of The Lord of the Rings of Power. It's an awesome return to the Middle-earth world with a new time frame, with some great characters, with mystery, intrigue, character development, and so as seeing what Middle-earth was like before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It has a lot of exciting things laid out for the future, where I'm so excited to see where things go from here. So I really enjoyed it, to where even if it's pretty slow, I still enjoyed the experience of the first season, and I'm just happy to return to the world of Middle-earth. So in the end, I'm going to give The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 1 an A-. Now it's that time to talk about spoilers for Season 1. We have a storyline with the Harfoots, mainly Nori and her friend Poppy, where they all of a sudden stumbled across a man who fell from the sky, and he's only referred to as the Stranger, because we don't know what his name is, we don't know who he is, or what he's doing here. And there's a lot of speculation going around that this may be Gandalf. Now, knowing the Middle-earth lore, I don't think it would be Gandalf, because he doesn't come to Middle-earth till the Third Age, and we're only in the Second. So I feel like the twist here is, unless they're going to change canon a little bit and make it Gandalf, because there are some subtle references here that make it seem as if that's the case, I do hope that this is maybe an original character. He's one of the blue wizards who apparently was an Istar sent here to do some good for Middle-earth or whatnot. So I'm very curious to know exactly what they're going to do with the Stranger, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding his character on what's he doing here, and why is he here, and what is his purpose. So there's a lot of great stuff there. I love the Stranger's dynamic with Nori. There's some very nice, dynamic, and cute moments with them. And so as just seeing the Harfoots just live their life, even if they're very much detached from everything else on the show. But I really liked David Wayman as the stranger, and I'm really curious to see what's next for his character. And so as what I really liked about the show is his dynamic with him and Nori. There's some cute moments there, and so as just where they lay things off, where now he and Nori are separated from the Harfoots, they're now going to go off on an adventure, and I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with those two in the following season. This show also reveals how Mordor officially became Mordor, where in episode 6, my favorite of the season, you had the big action sequence where Númenor and the people of Southlands fought the orcs led by Adar, and there's some crazy stuff. It's violent, it's wild, and if there's one thing I love about the show, they make the orcs horrifying. Directed by Jay Bayana, who did stuff like The Impossible, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. The orcs are horrifying on the show. They look practical, they look fantastic, and every time they're on screen, I have a sense of worriness and unease because of how terrifying these creatures are. But I do really like how episode 6 resolves, where they fought, Galadriel and Halbrand stopped Adar, and it turns out somebody took that mysterious sword that Theo had, and boom, unlocks something, and then water falls, and then it leads all the way down to the volcano, and then Mordor erupts, and boom, chaos ensues. Characters' fates are left up in the air, like Isildur, where he's presumed dead, but knowing lore, we know Isildur is going to have to be alive somehow, so I'm curious what happens with him in later seasons, unless he actually is dead, but I doubt that. And so Mordor is commenced. Adar gave Mordor the name of Mordor, and we see how the Southlands went from being the Southlands to being this place of darkness in Middle-earth, where you have a lot of danger with Mordor. So it's cool to finally see the origins of Mordor, and I'm really excited to see more of it going forward into the show. There's also another mystery on the show that's not just the stranger's identity, but it's also who is Sauron on the show. Because we are led to believe that one of our characters we're following is secretly Sauron disguised. The show made it seem it may be the stranger who is Sauron until that episode reveals it's not actually him. And then we find out in the finale, midway through, Halbrand is Sauron himself. It's very interesting because it's both a really shocking twist that blew my mind and really shook things up, but there are aspects to it where I kind of saw this one coming, because you have Sauron in the books described as a very good craftsman. Halbrand shows that in the finale, and so as with all these characters, it feels like the one who has a lot of suspicions and questions, because we don't know too much about them, is Halbrand. And it's sad because after Galadriel evaded going to the Undying Lands because she knew her mission wasn't complete, she stumbled across these people, and Halbrand was one of them. And I was really liking the dynamic between these two characters because they were helping one another, they were being there for one another, they did so much together on this season. And so as go from place to place, and Galadriel helps Halbrand, and Halbrand helps her. I was really liking their dynamic, and it shook me to my core when it turns out he is Sauron this whole time. The man who is responsible for all this chaos, aside from Morgoth and this wars and all this darkness and violence, it was him this whole time. Meaning Galadriel, who's on this mission to go kill Sauron, it made her realize he was with her this whole time, and she didn't even find out till now. And the sequence where they revealed it is fantastic and very effective, where I was truly surprised and shocked by it, aside from some aspects from prior episodes. And we see how, in the end, Halbrand puts Galadriel through a state in her mind, and Halbrand escapes. So Galadriel, Elrond, and Celebrimbor forge 3 rings, which finally gives name of the show the Rings of Power, because it's called Rings of Power. The 9 rings have not been forged quite yet in this time frame, and so we now have 3 rings to cap off the season for our 3 characters, because the elves are in a really bad place. Their tree is dying, and we learn the mithril is the one thing that's going to keep their leaves alive, and so they need something so that they can stay okay and stay alive, especially with what's been playing out. So they now have 3 rings of power, and I'm really curious as to how will this play out in future seasons. Will there be more rings till we get to the end of the show? Wherever that would be, that could be the 5th season from what I've heard. So we have 3 rings for Elrond, Galadriel, and Celebrimbor, and I'm really curious to see how that plays out and following seasons for it. And at the very end of the show, we see Sauron, as Halbrand was not who he said he was, and that he truly is the Dark Lord himself. He is in Mordor sporting a black cloak, and he sees Mount Doom, and he starts to walk closer to it as we see a wide shot of the whole location, and it comes to a close, and that is the end of season 1, and that is where we are left off. Season 1 ends on a note where I'm super optimistic and ecstatic for the future of the show. It really does a good job at making me care about the characters, develop this time frame of Middle Earth and the Second Age, and so as push these stories in new directions where I'm really excited and curious to see what comes next for our characters. And so as now that we know who Sauron is, and now that he's going to be a big player on the show for next season and moving forward, I am really excited for what's to come next for the show, because I really enjoyed the first season, and I'm super excited and pumped for the future of the show and what they're going to have in store for season 2 of Rings of Power, and I can't wait to see that on Prime Video when it comes out. So yeah, those are my thoughts on season 1 of The Lord of the Rings of Power. What are your thoughts on it? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but please be respectful. There was a lot of controversy surrounding on the show, but at least be respectful about it in the comments below. We can talk about what we like and dislike about the show without being mean about it, so please be civil and polite in the comments. Stay tuned for some upcoming videos I have planned. I'm going to have a review for Black Adam, as the hierarchy of power in the DC Universe is about to change when I go see that movie, and I can't wait. So please go stay tuned for that. And don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below. So please go down while you're at it. And thank you guys so much for watching. And don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button. And stay tuned for more.